Welcome back once again. I'm gonna do a video, and basically this is a video I've wanted to do for a while. It's kind of multifaceted. It's on trip planning. And this is one of this kind of goes back to I touched on it in a very early video. It's a video I probably did almost a year ago at this point. And it's one of the videos I think that I did on time management. And this is probably trip planning is probably one of the most important things to do, to be proficient at, to learn how to do properly, to manage your clock, to route yourself so that you don't get yourself into an accident, and to be safe. So trip planning is time well spent, and there are a lot of ways to do it. And to me, this is where you get into a debate. If you talk to old school truckers, you'll run into guys that say, and I brought out my truck atlas. I believe I mentioned a truck atlas in the What Should I Bring to Prime video. This is my truck atlas. I got this one used. This is a 2014 model. It's obviously 2017 now. Roads don't change a great deal. You don't need to buy a new atlas every year. I may consider a new one maybe next year, but I really like this one. This is the laminated bound, spiral bound version. So, you flip to, do a lot of my driving in Indiana, so it's almost always open to Indiana. But this is the laminated. This is a trucker GPS. So deluxe motor carriers edition of the Rand McNally GPS, laminated pages, extra durable, as you can read there. But I like this one. I got this used from somebody who left trucking, and that's a good way to save money because these are not cheap. I don't remember what the list price on the laminated ones are, like $70 or something like that. But anyway, I highly recommend you get this. If you don't know what the difference in very quick, what a truck GPS, all the roads are orange, highlighted orange. And any road that is highlighted orange is a truck route. So that's the first thing. And then you've got all sorts of pages at the front. And each page is either a section on regulations, vehicle registration, what are the appropriate operating authorities here for each state. So if you have questions and you need to know what website to go to or phone number to call, if you're traveling through a state, overweight and oversized state police phone numbers, hazardous materials, spill reporting phone numbers, and then you get to the next section. And this is the on-the-road directory. This is what makes the truck GPS especially valuable. And what this is, just to go for a smaller state, is you've got, let's go with Alabama here. Low clearance locations, permanent way stations, and restricted routes. So that's every road that has a low bridge that is going to be under 13 foot 6 inches. Standard is 13.6. It's going to have every permanent way station along a state highway or along a interstate, and it's going to have restricted routes. So you may have a state highway that has a section or has a bridge that has, instead of 40 tons, it may have a 24-ton weight limit or something, a 10-ton weight limit, and you have to find a way to detour around that. So, to get back to my point that I was making, you will have a lot of old school truckers who say, you need to have a GPS, or you need to have an Atlas, and only an Atlas, and everything you need is in an Atlas. And that's true. Everything you need is in one of these truckers' atlases. My opinion, utilize every resource that you can get your hands on. Trucker's Atlas. You've got a phone, most likely. You've got Google Maps. You have, with Google Maps, not only routing, and I'll have something to say about routing in a moment, but you've also got Google Earth View. And Google Earth View is great in some circumstances and not so great in other circumstances. It can give you a bird's eye view of a place you're picking up or delivering, and it may give you an idea where you turn into a building, where the security guard shed is, where you load, where you unload, or you may have no idea. You may take a look at the building and it's not real clear. As far as tanker, you may see tanks, in one corner of a building, and you say, okay, well, apparently I'm going to be unloading in that spot, and you get there and that's a different product, and you unload in a different spot. Or you see the tanks and that's where you load or unload. The other thing, Google Maps does not update constantly. They do a good job, definitely. But as an example, and one of the things I'm wanting to show you is Prime Decatur. If you take a look at Decatur, Indiana, you will not find Prime's terminal in Decatur, Indiana. This building is 4 years old. And the satellite imagery has not been updated in Decatur, Indiana to show you this facility. It is still an empty field. So the satellite imagery is over 4 years old for Decatur, Indiana. You can see the Walmart, which is across the street that way, but you can't see this facility. So this is where I get into use every resource you have available. You have, or I would suggest using a GPS. I know I did a review video. I use the Rand McNally 730. TND 730 is what it's called. If you've never seen these do very similar things to the Atlas. You can, however, still get yourself in trouble utilizing one of these GPSs. Supposedly everything that is in the front of this Atlas, weight restrictions, low bridges, restricted routes, way stations, they're supposed to be in here and more. Routing is in here, speed limits are in here, railroad tracks, all that stuff is supposed to be in here. But I guarantee you're going to find some things that are not marked or mismarked. But does that mean you shouldn't use a GPS? I don't think so. It's another tool that you have. And then the final thing, as far as a tool, Prime offers routing service. I'm going to show you the Qualcomm, and you can request directions. I haven't talked about it a ton, but you can request directions to a location, and Prime uses customer codes. They're 6 letters or less, or combination of letters and numbers. So Prime Decatur is Pridec, Pridec. So I have sent in it's called Macro 19, all of the request information, or I've arrived at a location, or I've dropped off a trailer, I've picked up a trailer. It's called a macro. So Macro 19 is request directions. And here is directions for Pridec. And there's the address. And if you scroll down, it's going to give you specific directions from a number of different ways to get here. So it says from I-69 to 469. If you're coming from Indianapolis, here's a different way to come. And then once you get here, it tells you that it's across the street from Walmart. It tells you where the loaded trailers are. It tells you where to park the empty trailers. It tells you how to get a hold of security to get in, which I'm not going to show you. And then it gives you a physical address, which is different. The address that was on top is actually the address for mail and for cars. So it's a different address. So yet another resource. Now, personally, what I do, if I'm going to go to a new location, customer I've never been to before, I don't do that very often now that I've been doing this for almost 2 years. But I did last week. Last Friday, I went to a customer I had never been to before. Very first thing I usually do is I look it up on Google Maps. It's the first thing I do. I want to know, first of all, especially if I don't remember where the town is, maybe I've driven through it, doesn't ring a bell where it is, or I haven't heard of the town. I don't know where it was. This happened to be Marion, Ohio. So I pull it up on Google Maps. The first thing that does is it gives me an idea. What direction am I going? Now, obviously, I have driven north, south, east, west out of Decatur, Indiana a number of times over the last 2 years so that I know how to, in this case, head east towards Marion, Ohio. And it's actually, this customer was not very far from another place that we deliver in Caledonia, Ohio. So I knew how to get the general direction. But then, once I found the customer, which you could see, there was an overhead view, satellite image on Google Maps, I asked Google how they would have driving directions. And remember, Google is going to tell you car driving directions. So you don't want to rely on and use Google's directions for driving your truck. But it gives you a general idea. It also will give you a general idea of distance and time that it takes. This is just how I do it. You may do it differently. Other drivers who listen or watch this video may say, that's the worst way I've ever heard of to do it. This is how I do it. Since I generally knew where I was going, that's what I did. I pulled up Google. I then plugged the address into my GPS. That matched up pretty closely with what Google told me. I then can consult with my atlas across Indiana and Ohio and double check the front of the atlas for any restrictions or low overpasses. You utilize every resource that you have when you go to a new customer. Now that I have been to this customer, I won't need to use the Atlas again. I won't need to use the computer, the Qualcomm, to request directions, which I did do. I'll just plug it into my GPS and remember the way that I went, because that's just, I kind of have a knack for remembering things. And even if there's a difference between what the GPS tells me and the way it should be, I tend to remember those things. That's just me. If you don't, if you need to do it differently, if you need to write things down, do that. Grab a notebook. You know, if you need a notebook and to have changes, and you need to figure out a way to set your notebook so that you're not distracted by it, you don't need to reach for it, but you can have it right here. You can write things with a grease pencil on your windshield. But trip planning. That's how trip planning works. That's what I do for trip planning. And having an idea, it takes an hour and a half to get from point A to point B. It takes 4 hours to get from point A to point B. My appointment time is X. I need to leave at least, if it's 4 hours, I need to leave 5 hours ahead of time so that I have an hour of leeway. And that way, you will never be late. You will never run into service failures. If you do run into traffic or weather, you will always be able to communicate that to dispatch, your fleet manager. If there is weather, you can plan to leave more than an hour, and that's what I usually do. If the weather is good, if it's 4 hours away, I'll leave 5 hours before delivery time. And in 2 years, I haven't had a service failure. Service failure being deliver late. But trip planning, probably the single most important thing, at least as far as time management. And again, I did a video almost a year ago about how time management is so incredibly valuable. And I've been wanting to do something on trip planning, and finally decided. It's just because there's so many moving pieces with getting an Atlas and the GPS and bringing the Qualcomm and all that stuff. Finally got a chance to talk about it a little bit today. But again, don't rely on any single piece. I think that's the biggest thing I would take out of this. You'll talk to old school guys who say, you just use an Atlas, you'll be fine. You'll talk to some new school guys who say, forget the Atlas. I just want to use my GPS and follow that. To me, this is a great age that we have this technology, everything available. Use it all. Use every last bit of it. You may come up with a system where you decide, I don't like the Atlas, I don't like the GPS, I'm just going to use the Atlas, I'm just going to use whatever you work out. Just make sure you're safe. If you get somewhere and you see a no truck sign, don't be so hard-headed that you say, well, my GPS tells me I can go down that road even though it says no trucks. Don't go across a bridge just because you say, well, the GPS tells me I can, and the bridge says 6-ton weight limit, and then you destroy a bridge like that lady did in Indiana a year ago. Just be smart, be safe, trip plan, and that's it. It's a very key, important part of truck driving. I think it's the single most important part of truck driving. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. We'll talk to you again next week. And again, if you want to come to Prime, click on the link in the description. I'll get you right to the application to apply to drive for Prime. And we'll talk to you again next week.